Before Egypt raised its pyramids or Greece spoke its myths, a civilization emerged from the mud between two rivers, sudden, complete, and inexplicable. The Sumerians built cities where none had stood, carved laws into clay, charted the stars, and then vanished. No one knows from where they came or why they disappeared. What they left behind are fragments, tablets, temples, songs, clues to a story that defies reason. Some call them the first humans to understand the gods, others, the last heirs of a forgotten world. Tonight we follow those traces, 10 mysteries written in stone and starlight, to uncover what even time could not erase. This is 10 Unsolved Secrets of the Ancient Sumerians. Number 10. The King List. Deep beneath the quiet halls of Oxford's Ashmolean Museum rests a prism of baked clay. Its surface, etched with thousands of wedge-shaped cuneiform marks, holds one of the most puzzling records of the ancient world. To a passerby, it looks like an ordinary tablet, but to historians, it is a door into an age where time and myth blur into one. The Sumerian King List. Its first line reads like the opening verse of a sacred text. When kingship descended from heaven, it was in Eridu. It's a simple sentence, yet it redefines how the Sumerians saw history. To them, kingship was not invented by humans. It was a divine institution bestowed from the sky. Eridu, one of the world's earliest cities near today's Abu Shahrin in southern Iraq, was the cradle where heaven's rule first touched the earth. What follows that line defies all sense. The list names 8 rulers who reigned before the Great Flood, the antediluvian kings, each with lifespans so long they verge on cosmic. Alulim of Eridu ruled for 28,800 years, Alaulgar for 36,000, Enmenluana for 43,200. The total duration before the flood, according to the tablets, exceeds 241,200 years. Then the record states, then the flood swept over. Afterward, new kings emerge, their reigns shrinking from millennia to centuries, then to decades. For over a century, scholars have struggled to explain these numbers. Some claim they are symbolic, a literary way to glorify legendary rulers. Others argue that the numbers encode astronomical cycles, using base 60 mathematics to measure not years, but lunar months or solar precessions. When converted, many reigns align with known cosmic periods, like the 26,000-year precession of Earth's axis, or the 360-day ideal solar year that governed ancient calendars. These figures may not describe lifespans at all, but the rhythm of the universe as seen through divine kingship. Archaeology adds layers of intrigue. The earliest copies of the list, including the Weld Blundell prism, dating to around 1800 BCE, were not unique. 18 versions have been found across Mesopotamia, inscribed in both Sumerian and Akkadian. Each differs slightly, suggesting it was a living document, rewritten to legitimize new dynasties. Kings of Ur and Kish copied it to prove their divine right to rule, tracing their lineage back to heaven itself. Yet beneath this political layer lies something older, stranger, and harder to explain. Beneath the ruins of Eridu, archaeologists discovered 18 layers of occupation, stacked one atop another like pages in a book. The oldest, dating to around 5400 BCE, reveals temples aligned with celestial patterns, evidence that Eridu had already been a sacred site long before written history. If the Sumerians believed kingship descended from heaven there, it may not have been a metaphor. It could reflect a real memory of an ancestral migration, a people who arrived with advanced knowledge, suddenly transforming the landscape into civilization. The King List's most haunting feature, though, is the flood. Around the same region at Shurapak, excavators in the 1920s uncovered a deep layer of silt, a massive flood deposit stretching for miles, dated by radiocarbon to around 2900 BCE. Beneath it lay pre-flood houses, above it a new culture. This boundary aligns precisely with the transition between antediluvian and post-diluvian kings in the list. What had long been dismissed as myth now had geological support. Across other ancient records, echoes of this cataclysm multiply. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Atrahasis Epic, and later the Book of Genesis all describe a flood that swept over the world, destroying humanity, sparing only one chosen survivor. These tales differ in detail but not in essence. A cleansing, a restart. Could it be that the Sumerians preserved an ancestral memory of a real global event, perhaps triggered by abrupt climate shifts at the end of the Younger Dryas, around 10,800 BCE, when sea levels rose and entire coastlines vanished? Some researchers have compared the reigns of the pre-flood kings to cycles of climate and geology. Each vast number may represent a geological era, the span between environmental resets. In that sense, the King List would not be political propaganda, but a scientific record in mythic form. A memory of Earth's periodic catastrophes written as the reigns of gods. The descent of kingship would mark the re-emergence of order after chaos, the rebirth of civilization from flood to flood. Yet not all evidence is symbolic. Several kings listed after the flood, such as Etana of Kish, Lugalbanda, and Gilgamesh of Uruk, appear in independent inscriptions and monuments. Their names have been found on bricks, temple dedications, and artifacts. This intertwining of verifiable rulers with impossible reigns creates a problem that still haunts Assyriology. How do you separate legend from history when the ancients never drew that line? Modern imaging techniques are giving us new ways to study the tablets. 3D laser scanning allows researchers to map every wedge mark with microscopic accuracy, revealing corrections, erasures, and annotations made by scribes thousands of years apart. The prism surface shows that the list was not a static artifact, but a palimpsest of memory, a story continually rewritten as dynasties rose and fell. In that sense, it mirrors the very civilization it describes, enduring but never fixed. Still, the question remains, where did these extraordinary numbers come from? Why record them so carefully if they were never meant to be read literally? When the Sumerians spoke of a king ruling for 36,000 years, perhaps they were not exaggerating but encoding meaning, expressing that these figures represented ages of divine order, not mortal time. The language of the gods was number, and only those initiated in its mystery could read between the symbols. Some modern thinkers, from historians like Samuel Noah Kramer to independent researchers, have speculated that the list may preserve the memory of prehistoric advanced cultures, wiped out by floods or climate collapse, whose knowledge seeded early Mesopotamia. Others caution that such claims risk mythologizing evidence, reminding us that archaeology, not imagination, must have the last word. And yet, each new discovery, each flood layer, each star alignment, pushes that boundary further. The King List remains one of humanity's most extraordinary paradoxes, part mythology, part datasheet, a chronicle that bridges the divine and the empirical. It tells of a time when human memory reached back before history, when rulers were measured not by deeds, but by the cosmos itself. Number 9. The ziggurat. In the desert of southern Iraq, where the wind moves like an ancient breath across empty plains, a giant of brick and dust still rises from the earth, silent, geometric, eternal. This is the great ziggurat of the most enduring monument of Sumer. To stand before it is to feel the weight of 4,000 years pressing into a single line of sight, a stairway that once linked heaven and earth. The ziggurat was built around 2100 BCE, during the reign of King Ur-Nammu, founder of the third dynasty of Archaeologists date its construction to the same era as the pyramids of Egypt's Middle Kingdom, yet its design philosophy is entirely different. The Egyptian pyramid pointed upward in stillness. The ziggurat was built to be climbed, a mountain made by human hands. Rising in receding tiers, its base measured about 64 by 46 meters, and though its top is long gone, scholars estimate it once reached nearly 30 meters high, the tallest structure in Mesopotamia. Its purpose, however, remains one of archaeology's great riddles. Officially, the ziggurat was a temple platform dedicated to Nana, the moon god and patron of Ancient hymns describe it as a mountain of radiance, a stairway for the gods. On its summit stood a small shrine where priests offered food, incense, and song to the deity believed to dwell above. At night, when the moon rose, its white light washed over the bricks until the entire structure shimmered like silver. To the Sumerians, it was not mere architecture, it was cosmic order built in clay. When Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the site in the 1920s, he discovered that the visible structure was only a fraction of its story. Beneath the baked bricks of Ur-Nammu's era lay older layers, foundations of mud brick and reed mats, dating centuries earlier. This was not the first ziggurat. It was a rebuilding, perhaps of a design already ancient. Even Ur-Nammu's own inscriptions call his project a restoration of the House of Nana, implying that he was reviving, not inventing, a sacred plan. What did these early builders know that compelled them to reconstruct the same form again and again? The answer may lie in their relationship with the sky. Archaeologists have noted that the ziggurat's corners are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. The main staircase faces the rising point of the moon during the equinoxes. This alignment suggests the builders were not only honouring the gods but measuring the heavens. The ziggurat may have doubled as a lunar observatory, a calendar in brick that tracked celestial cycles long before mechanical astronomy. Across Mesopotamia, dozens of ziggurats once towered over their cities. At Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, Larsa, and Babylon, each was dedicated to a local deity, yet their architecture followed the same blueprint: a terraced mountain symbolizing the cosmic axis, the link between heaven, earth, and the underworld. In Akkadian, the word zikuratu means to rise up, echoing both a physical ascent and a spiritual one. In Sumerian belief, the universe was a three-tiered structure: the heavens of Anu above, the earth of Enlil in the middle, and the abyss of Enki below. The ziggurat embodied that hierarchy in stone. To climb it was to retrace the path of creation itself. Priests ascended the stairways bearing offerings, bread, oil, wine, while musicians played lyres and drums at each level. The ceremony represented not worship from below, but communion between realms. On the summit, a chosen priestess served as the earthly bride of the god, performing rites that renewed the fertility of the land. Some texts describe these rituals as sacred marriages, where divine and mortal met under the moonlight, ensuring the harmony of heaven and earth. Modern engineers are astonished by the ziggurat's endurance. Built of sun-dried bricks at its core and kiln-fired bricks on the exterior, the structure was bound with natural bitumen, a kind of ancient asphalt that waterproofed and stabilized it. The precision of its construction, the layering, the drainage system, the symmetry, rivals modern methods. Even after thousands of years of erosion, its core remains remarkably intact, an early triumph of civil engineering. Satellite imaging and photogrammetry have revealed further secrets. The ziggurat's base sits on an elevated terrace shaped like a truncated cone, a design that distributes weight evenly and resists earthquakes. Subsurface radar has detected chambers and passageways, possibly remnants of older temple complexes. Nearby inscriptions mention astronomical observations, suggesting that priests recorded the movements of the moon and planets from its upper platform. Some researchers even propose that the ziggurat served as a symbolic replica of Mount Eker, the mythical mountain of the gods described in Sumerian hymns. The ziggurat's design, stairways leading to a vanished summit, has haunted human imagination ever since. In later Mesopotamian legend, A similar structure appears under another name, the Tower of Babel. Though separated by centuries, both share the same ambition, the attempt to bridge the divine and the human, to ascend through knowledge and devotion. Genesis describes the tower as humanity's rebellion. The Sumerians may have seen it as an act of alignment. One myth warns that when men build too close to heaven, the gods send confusion among their tongues. Perhaps a poetic echo of the collapse of old languages after Sumer's fall. Archaeologists working at the site in recent years have restored portions of the stairways, stabilizing the crumbling edges. Their drones capture haunting aerial images, the ziggurat's base forming a perfect rectangle, its tiers like steps in a forgotten equation. To the modern eye, it looks geometric. To the ancients, it was alive. Each level represented a layer of the cosmos, each stair a prayer turned into architecture. Perhaps the enduring mystery of the ziggurat lies not in its function but in its philosophy. It was both temple and telescope, altar and axis. It embodied the belief that divinity was not distant but measurable, that by understanding proportion and direction, humanity could find its place in the pattern of the universe. The Sumerians didn't build to defy the heavens, they built to mirror them. What do you think? Were the ziggurats built by human hands, or do they hide traces of something far older? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you find this fascinating, don't forget to like the video to help spread the story of humanity's first civilization. Number 8. Gilgamesh and the Anunnaki Enigma. The story begins in Uruk, one of the oldest cities on Earth. Its walls stretch 6 miles in circumference, rising from the plain like the bones of a forgotten giant. The bricks still bear the faint wedge-shaped marks of the world's first written language, cuneiform, and it is here, around 2100 BCE, that a legend was carved into clay. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving story of humankind. The hero of that story, Gilgamesh, was not just a myth. Archaeologists have found his name inscribed on temple foundations and cylinder seals, identifying him as a historical king of Uruk around 2700 BCE. Yet the tale told of him is something greater than history, the journey of a man 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal, searching for the one thing that gods had denied all men: immortality. In the Sumerian worldview, the gods, known as the Anunnaki, ruled from the heavens but walked among humans. Their name means those of royal seed, or those who came from the sky. They were not abstract deities of faith, but tangible forces, the personifications of cosmic order, fertility, storms, and destiny. Their leader was Anu, the father of heaven, with his divine children Enlil, lord of the air, and Enki, god of wisdom and the deep waters. Together they formed the great assembly of the Anunnaki, divine administrators of the universe. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, these gods are not distant spectators. They intervene, advise, punish, and test. When Gilgamesh defies the laws of the cosmos by seeking eternal life, it is the Anunnaki who stand in judgment. Through his story, we see the Sumerian vision of humanity's relationship with the divine, not blind worship, but negotiation, not obedience, but dialogue. The tablets that record his tale were discovered in the mid-19th century among the ruins of Nineveh, in the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. Written in Akkadian, they preserve an older Sumerian oral tradition that likely dates back to 2000 BCE or earlier. The 11th tablet describes a great flood, eerily similar to the biblical account of Noah, but predating it by 1,000 years. In it, a man named Utnapishtim, the Sumerian Noah, survives a divine deluge sent by the Anunnaki to cleanse the earth. The gods grant him eternal life, making him the last immortal, the secret Gilgamesh will cross the world to uncover. To reach Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh must pass through realms guarded by beings of impossible form, scorpion men, whose radiance is terrifying, whose look brings death. These creatures, half man and half beast, guard the twin mountains where the sun rises and sets. Beyond them lies the Sea of Death, and on its far shore, the survivor of the flood. Scholars interpret this landscape as myth, but others see encoded astronomy. The scorpion men representing Scorpius on the horizon, the mountains symbolizing the equinoxes, the voyage through darkness marking the sun's nightly descent below the earth. The Anunnaki, however, remain the enigma at the heart of this world. In thousands of cuneiform tablets they appear as judges, watchers and creators. Some are linked to stars and planets, Nana to the moon, Utu to the sun, Inanna to Venus. To the Sumerians, these were not metaphors but literal truths. Each god embodied the intelligence of its celestial body, its predictable yet divine movement across the sky. The heavens were not distant, they were a living map of power. Modern researchers have long been fascinated by the Anunnaki. Scholars interpret them as mythological personifications of natural forces, a complex polytheism built on observation of the stars. But in the 20th century, alternative theories emerged, most famously by authors like Zecharia Sitchin, who proposed that the Anunnaki were not deities at all, but ancient visitors from the stars, beings from a hypothetical planet, Nibiru, who engineered humanity through genetic manipulation. Archaeologists, however, reject these interpretations. There is no evidence of extraterrestrial contact in Sumerian archaeology. The texts, when read correctly, do not describe spacecraft or technology, but rituals and cosmic metaphors. The Anunnaki were gods because they represented order over chaos, not because they flew from the sky in machines. Yet Sitchin's theory lingers in popular imagination because it speaks to something deeper, the persistent feeling that the Sumerians knew something we have forgotten. And perhaps, in a sense, they did. The Sumerians were the first to map the stars systematically, to measure time by celestial movement, to recognize the synchronization of lunar and solar cycles. Their gods were living patterns, the embodiment of mathematics and myth intertwined. When they said the Anunnaki descended from heaven, they may have been describing the emergence of cosmic order into the material world, the moment when human consciousness recognized the structure behind the stars. In the epic, after enduring deserts, mountains, and the waters of death, Gilgamesh finally meets Utnapishtim, who tells him the truth. Immortality is not for men. The gods decreed that when the gods created man, they kept eternal life in their own hands. Yet Utnapishtim offers him a test, to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, symbolizing the cycle of creation. Gilgamesh fails. He sleeps. For all his power, all his divinity, he cannot escape the nature of man. And yet, the story does not end in despair. Before Gilgamesh departs, Utnapishtim tells him of a hidden plant. The old man becomes young again, growing at the bottom of the sea. Gilgamesh dives into the water, retrieves it, and begins the long journey home. But on his return, he stops to bathe. A serpent steals the plant and sloughs its skin, renewing itself, leaving Gilgamesh to return empty-handed. It's one of the most poetic moments in all ancient literature. Immortality escaping the grasp of man, returning to nature where it belongs. Through Gilgamesh, the Sumerians taught that eternity is not in living forever, but in creating something that does. And through the Anunnaki, the gods who measured the heavens, decreed destinies, and watched from their mountain of judgment, they gave us the first framework of cosmic law, the belief that humanity's path mirrors the stars. Number 7, Arata, the city that shouldn't exist. In the poems of ancient Sumer, there is a city more dazzling than any ruin archaeologists have ever found. A city of lapis lazuli walls, of gold that gleamed like sunlight on water. Its name was Arata, and the Sumerians described it not as a myth, but as a real place. Far away, high in the mountains, beyond the 7 ranges. They said its craftspeople shaped metals finer than any in Uruk, its temples glowed with gems from the heart of the earth, and its rulers spoke directly with the goddess Inanna. Yet for more than a century, excavations across Mesopotamia have failed to find it. Arata, the city of wonder, remains missing, and that absence is what makes it unforgettable. Our only map to Arata comes from Sumerian literature, a cycle of myths known as Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata, Enmerkar and En-Suhgir-Ana, and Lugalbanda in the mountain cave. These tales, written on clay tablets over 4,000 years old, tell of rivalry between 2 cities: Uruk, the rising power of the plains, and Arata, its mysterious counterpart beyond the horizon. The king of Uruk, Enmerkar, desires to bring Arata's riches to his city, its gold, its lapis lazuli, its artistry, for the glory of Inanna. But Arata refuses, claiming it is the holier city, chosen first by the goddess. What follows is not a war of swords, but of language. Enmerkar sends messengers to Arata with demands written on clay tablets, some of the earliest references to writing in human history. The Lord of Arata answers with challenges, riddles, and spells. The stories unfold as contests of wit and divine favour. Who can build the greater temple? Who can speak the truer prayer? Who can prove Inanna's love? Beneath their mythic tone lies something astonishingly human, the echo of diplomacy, trade, and competition between 2 distant civilizations. For centuries, scholars thought Arata was pure invention, a mythic mirror through which Sumerians explored their own ambitions. But the discovery of several archaeological sites has begun to change that view. In southeastern Iran, along the Halil River, excavations at Jiroft uncovered an advanced Bronze Age culture dating to nearly the same time as early Sumer. Here, archaeologists found intricate chlorite vases and stone carvings, some depicting the same motifs as Mesopotamian art: serpents, winged beings, and gods seated before altars. One cylinder seal even shows a temple facade almost identical to those of Ur and Eridu. The artifacts of Jiroft display an artistry too developed to be coincidental. They hint at an urban centre, perhaps a network of cities, that flourished around 3000 BCE, trading across the Iranian plateau. Chemical analysis of lapis lazuli beads from both Jiroft and Mesopotamia confirms a shared source: the Badakhshan mines of northeastern Afghanistan, nearly 1,500 kilometres away. It means that long before the Silk Road, ancient traders were already crossing mountains and deserts to move stone and gold. This web of exchange fits perfectly with the legends. Arata, the far mountain city of treasures, may not have been a myth after all. The texts give even more clues. They describe Arata as a city accessible only after crossing 7 mountains and 7 rivers, a poetic geography that matches the Zagros Mountains stretching east of Sumer. The climate data from that region, gathered through paleobotanical studies and core samples, suggests that during the 3rd millennium BCE, the area was fertile, watered by glacial melt and capable of supporting complex societies. The line between myth and archaeology begins to blur. Arata's legend also hides something deeper, a memory of competition between 2 worlds, the flat floodplains of Mesopotamia and the highlands beyond. Mesopotamian city-states depended on trade for raw materials they lacked: metals, stone, and timber. The mountain cultures, in turn, coveted the food surpluses and luxury goods of the plains. In the myths, Inanna's shifting favour between Uruk and Arata may symbolise this very relationship, the constant tug between 2 halves of a single economy. And yet, Arata refuses to fit neatly into history. Some historians see it not as a literal city, but as a civilizational archetype, a remembrance of an even earlier culture erased by the flood. The same motifs that describe Arata, mountains of gold, rivers of precious stone, divine messengers crossing impossible distances, appear in myths from the Indus Valley, the Iranian Plateau, and even early Vedic texts. Could they all be fragments of one vanished tradition? Number 6. Queen Kubaba. In the dusty archives of the past, amid endless lists of kings, warriors, and gods, there appears a single name that disrupts the pattern: Kubaba, the only woman ever recorded in the Sumerian King List. She stands alone among hundreds of male rulers, her title preserved in clay for over 4,000 years. Kubaba, the woman tavern keeper who made firm the foundations of Kish. That one sentence, carved into cuneiform, has haunted historians for a century. Who was this woman who rose from obscurity to rule a city-state? And why did history allow her name to endure when so many others faded into dust? The King List places Kubaba's reign around 2500 BCE, during a time when Sumer was divided into competing city kingdoms. Kish, her city, was one of the most powerful. Yet the record gives no genealogy, no royal husband, no divine patron. She was a commoner, a woman of the tavern, a profession viewed with both respect and suspicion in ancient Mesopotamia. But taverns were not the dens of vice we imagine today. In Sumer, they were social centres, places where merchants gathered, deals were struck, and travellers exchanged news from distant lands. The tavern keeper was a communicator, a negotiator, a keeper of trust, the perfect vantage point for someone with ambition. Kubaba's rise may have begun there, behind the clay jars of beer and the smoke of oil lamps, listening to soldiers, scribes, and traders who shaped the city's politics. The Sumerians revered beer as a gift from the goddess Ninkasi, symbol of abundance and wisdom. Brewing was considered sacred work, and the tavern itself a space where mortal and divine could mingle. Perhaps in a world still half mythic, Kubaba embodied that liminal power. A woman of the hearth who became a woman of the throne. According to later tradition, her rule brought stability. The list says she made firm the foundations of Kish, a phrase scholars interpret as peace, reconstruction, and prosperity after turmoil. Archaeological layers from that era indeed show renewed urban growth in the region. Walls repaired, trade revived, temples rebuilt. Though no monument of Kubaba herself survives, her influence may echo in the administrative tablets that follow her reign. Careful records of grain, labour, and taxation, the marks of a steady government. But what makes her story even more extraordinary is what came after. The King List credits her with founding a dynasty that lasted 100 years. Her descendants, the so-called dynasty of Kubaba, ruled Kish long after she was gone. That continuity, in a time when power often shifted violently between rival cities, is remarkable. It suggests not myth, but memory, a legacy preserved in institutions strong enough to outlast a single life. Still, Kubaba's name did not remain bound to history alone. A millennium later, she resurfaces in a different guise. As Kubaba the goddess, worshipped across Anatolia and northern Syria, her image carved into rock reliefs at Carchemish, standing on a lion and holding a pomegranate. Here she is no longer a tavern keeper, but the Queen of Heaven, Mother of Kings, Protector of Cities. By the first millennium BCE, the Hittites and Phrygians had transformed her into Cybele, the great mother of Mount Ida, a goddess of wild nature and rebirth whose worship would later spread through Greece and Rome. How did a mortal queen of Sumer become the mother of gods in Anatolia? Scholars still debate the link, but linguistic and cultural evidence is compelling. The name Kubaba shifts only slightly across the centuries. Her attributes, lions, fertility, divine motherhood, remaining constant. It's as if the memory of her reign survived not through lineage, but through mythic evolution, crossing languages and borders until history turned her into legend. Kubaba's transformation reveals something vital about the ancient world. the porous boundary between ruler and deity. In early Mesopotamia, kings were seen as the chosen of gods and queens as embodiments of divine principles. The priestess Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon of Akkad, would later become the first named author in history, writing hymns to the goddess Inanna that describe a union between woman, word, and power. Kubaba was her precursor, the proof that a woman could hold sacred and political authority in one body. As the centuries passed, patriarchal empires replaced the matriarchal echoes of the early Bronze Age. The divine feminine receded into myth, her power diluted into symbols of fertility or motherhood. Kubaba's story, preserved in clay but stripped of context, became an oddity, one line in a list of kings. Yet her persistence through time, surviving as goddess when her male counterparts vanished, speaks volumes. She outlasted them not by force, but by transformation. And so, in the endless list of kings, the lone woman endures, the tavern keeper who became the mother of civilizations, the mortal whose memory refused to die. Number 5. The mathematical code. Long before Greece had its geometry or Egypt its sacred cubits, the Sumerians were already counting the heavens. Their mathematics was so advanced, so precise, that modern engineers still use its patterns today. Every clock, every compass, every angle in a circle is a whisper from their world. But what makes their system truly mysterious is not just its sophistication. It's that no one can explain why they chose it or where it came from. The Sumerians did not count by tens like we do. Their entire mathematical universe revolved around the number 60, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. We still live inside their system 5,000 years later. Other cultures chose 12s or 20s, but Sumer chose a number that encodes harmony, a number divisible by more factors than any other between 1 and 100. To them, 60 was perfect. To us, it feels chosen. Clay tablets from Uruk, Sippar, and Nippur, dating to nearly 2000 BCE, reveal the staggering breadth of their calculations. They knew how to divide, multiply, and calculate square and cube roots. One tablet, known as Plimpton 322, discovered in the ruins of Lhasa, contains a list of what mathematicians now call Pythagorean triples, sets of numbers that satisfy the theorem of right triangles. It was written 1,500 years before Pythagoras was born. The precision of its ratios suggests it was not an abstract exercise, but a practical tool, perhaps for surveying, architecture, or even astronomical observation. This system, known as sexagesimal, used cuneiform wedges to represent numbers from 1 to 59, repeating cyclically, much like the hands of a clock. The Sumerians didn't need a zero, yet they understood the concept of positional value, the very foundation of modern arithmetic. When they carved those marks into clay, they were doing something no one else had done before. They were turning time, space, and divinity into numbers. In Sumerian mythology, all knowledge, from agriculture to astronomy, originated from the god Enki, lord of water and wisdom, who kept the divine decrees of civilization. Among these decrees was the gift of measure, the art of balance and order. To measure the world was to speak the language of the gods. Every brick in a temple, every channel of an irrigation canal was laid according to a geometry that reflected cosmic harmony. At Eridu, one of the oldest cities on Earth, archaeologists uncovered a series of temples built on the same site over thousands of years. Each reconstruction preserved the same proportions and orientation, always aligned to the cardinal directions. This continuity wasn't coincidence. The Sumerians believed architecture had to mirror the structure of the cosmos. The base of the temple symbolized the earth, its roof, the heavens. Between them ran the vertical axis, the line of communication with the divine. In modern mathematical terms, their cities were fractals of the sky. Even their ziggurats, those stepped mountains of brick, follow precise ratios. The height of each level decreased in perfect geometric progression, creating an optical illusion of symmetry from every angle. When viewed from above, the ziggurat's perimeter divided into 360 equal units. The circle of the year. Every stairway, every terrace corresponded to a planetary or lunar path. One of the most intriguing aspects of Sumerian math lies in its astronomical correlations. The number 60 appears repeatedly in the sky. 6 Artuk 60, so 360, the ideal days of a year. 12 Arsk 30, the Re 60, the division of the ecliptic into constellations. The Sumerians mapped the heavens into 12 houses, each representing a portion of the sun's path, the earliest form of the zodiac. These were not merely astrological signs, they were a cosmic clock marking the turning of ages. Scientists today studying the Sumerian calendar note its synchronization with precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the stars over millennia. To detect that pattern requires observations spanning thousands of years. Either the Sumerians inherited this knowledge from much older traditions, or their priest astronomers maintained meticulous records for generations. In either case, it implies an intellectual continuity rare in the ancient world. Recent digital reconstructions have allowed researchers to simulate Sumerian star maps using planetarium software. When aligned to the skies of 3000 BCE, certain temple orientations, particularly at and Nippur, match lunar standstills and the rising of Venus at specific intervals. These alignments suggest that their mathematics wasn't abstract, but observational, grounded in the movements of the real heavens above their cities. And perhaps that's why their system endured. Long after Sumer fell, the mathematics of 60 survived through Babylonian astronomy, Greek geometry, Roman engineering, and into the modern world. Every rotation of the clock's hands is a relic of that ancient code, a code so perfect it never needed to be rewritten. Number 4, the merchants of eternity. Before empire, before coin, before the concept of nations, the first great economy on Earth was already flowing, not through digital screens or caravans of gold, but through boats of reeds and sails made from woven flax drifting down the rivers of ancient Sumer. They carried barley, copper, wool, lapis lazuli, and the dream of connection. The men and women aboard them were not conquerors. They were the world's first merchants, the silent architects of globalization, 5,000 years before the word existed. At the dawn of the 3rd millennium BCE, Sumer was a network of city-states, Uruk, Lagash, Eridu, Kish, scattered like islands across the floodplain between the Tigris and Euphrates. The land was fertile, but it lacked the raw materials of progress. No stone for carving, no metal for tools, no timber for temples. What the Sumerians possessed instead was imagination, and rivers that led to the sea. Those twin gifts became their lifeline. Through them, they reached outward into the unknown. Archaeologists have recovered a stunning record of this outward reach. Thousands of cuneiform tablets describe voyages, contracts, and shipments. They mention foreign lands by name: Dilmun, Magan, and Meluha. Dilmun, now identified with the island of Bahrain, was a vital trading hub linking Mesopotamia with the copper mines of Oman and the civilizations beyond the Arabian Sea. Magan, likely the coast of Oman itself, supplied the pure copper that fueled the Bronze Age revolution. And Meluha, a name that long puzzled scholars, is now believed to refer to the Indus Valley civilization, a vast urban culture in what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. Seals from Sumer have been found in the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, their wedge-like carvings still sharp after 5,000 years. Likewise, Indus-style carnelian beads and ivory combs have been unearthed in Mesopotamian graves. The evidence is unmistakable. Trade connected the two cradles of civilization, separated by more than 1,000 miles of desert and sea. Sumerian merchants were already navigating the Persian Gulf, hugging the coastlines of Iran and Arabia, sailing in ships built of date palm wood sealed with bitumen. In one ancient tablet, a merchant describes a voyage from Ur to Dilmun. He lists his cargo: textiles, silver, and grain, and the return goods: copper, gold, and rare stones. The text ends with an offering to Enki, god of water and wisdom, asking for calm seas. It is both prayer and business record, a reminder that in Sumer, trade was sacred. The god Enki was said to have built the first canals, linking the freshwater of his domain to the salty sea. To cross that boundary was to step into his realm, a world where knowledge flowed as freely as the tides. Archaeological imagery confirms these routes. Satellite scans reveal the remains of ancient harbours on the Gulf Coast, at Ras al-Jins in Oman, Failaka in Kuwait, and Bahrain's Khalat al-Bahrain fortress. There, divers have found stone anchors, copper tools, and shards of Mesopotamian pottery mixed with local wares. These finds form a maritime map stretching from the mouth of the Euphrates to the shores of the Indus. It is the first global supply chain, built not by kings or armies, but by merchants who believed the sea was a highway, not a barrier. As commerce flourished, Sumer developed the infrastructure to manage it. The world's first accountants emerged, scribes hunched over clay tablets, recording every transaction with styluses cut from reeds. They invented receipts, ledgers, and contracts, pressing the wet clay with their seals to certify authenticity. Some tablets still bear fingerprints, those of the merchants who signed their names in clay instead of ink. Others include lists of crew members, inventories of cargo, and notations of interest rates. These were not primitive traders, but disciplined financiers. The earliest example of credit, a deferred payment on a shipment, dates to this era. Civilization's financial heartbeat began here. Economically, Sumer's success reshaped the world. As copper from Magan fed bronze workshops in Ur, and lapis from Badakhshan gleamed in temples, trade transformed Sumerian society. Merchants gained status alongside priests and nobles. Some even became ambassadors, representing their city-states abroad. It was an early form of soft power, diplomacy through commerce. Scientific analysis has illuminated just how vast this system was. Using isotopic fingerprinting, researchers have traced tin and copper artifacts found in Mesopotamia to ore sources as far as Afghanistan and Central Asia. Chemical residue tests on ancient jars from Ur show traces of imported oils and resins, frankincense, myrrh, and cedar, substances that linked Mesopotamia to Arabia and the Levant. One tablet even records the arrival of a ship carrying black stone from Meluha, likely obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for its sharpness and mystery. It is telling that the oldest known world map, discovered in Babylon, is based on a Sumerian model, a circular world surrounded by the cosmic sea with cities and mountains arranged in geometric order. The merchant's journey had become the template for the cosmos. Yet trade is never without danger. Storms, piracy, and political upheaval haunted every route. Some expeditions never returned. In the tombs of Ur, archaeologists found shell-inlaid mosaics showing ships and processions of traders carrying goods, eternal tributes to the men who turned peril into prosperity. Over centuries, Sumer's trade web thickened, then unravelled. As the rivers silted and rival powers rose, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, the centre shifted, but the pattern remained. The routes blazed by Sumerian merchants became the arteries of history. The Persian Gulf trade, the Silk Road, the maritime highways of the Indian Ocean. Every empire that followed merely inherited the map they drew. Number 3. Ancient Sumerian seals. In the ruins of ancient Sumer, Archaeologists sometimes uncover objects no larger than a man's thumb, small cylinders of stone, polished smooth, etched with scenes so intricate that even under magnification the details defy belief. These are the Sumerian cylinder seals, among the most extraordinary artifacts ever made by human hands. The first seals appeared around 3500 BCE during the Uruk period, the same age that saw the birth of writing. They were tools of identity and authority, used to sign documents, mark property, and protect containers of goods. But in Sumer, practical and sacred were never separate. A seal was not just a signature, it was a soul. To impress one's seal on clay was to leave a spiritual imprint, proof that the owner, the god, and the act itself were aligned. The materials chosen for these seals were never random. Craftsmen worked with hard luminous stones, lapis lazuli, hematite, serpentine, chalcedony, imported from far lands through the same trade routes that linked Sumer to Iran and Afghanistan. Each colour carried symbolism: blue for divinity, green for fertility, black for protection. Using drills tipped with copper and abrasive powders, they carved lines so fine that modern jewellers struggle to replicate them. Some seals show cuts no thicker than a strand of hair, spirals etched so precisely they seem to require magnification or rotary tools. When examined under microscopes, the craftsmanship astonishes. Grooves are perfectly uniform. Tiny dots appear where no human hand could have placed them by chance. Scholars debate whether the Sumerians used primitive lathes or bow drills, both known from later Mesopotamian workshops. However they achieved it, the result was technical mastery centuries ahead of its time. But it is what the seals depict that turns astonishment into mystery. Many show ordinary life: farmers tilling fields, merchants weighing goods, shepherds driving flocks. Yet others open windows into a cosmic imagination: gods with horned crowns emerging from mountains, winged figures offering rings and rods of power, stars arranged in perfect circles. Some seals depict what looks like the solar system: a central star surrounded by orbs of various sizes. One, from Sippar, shows the sun disk radiating from the centre, encircled by planets. Scholars caution against overinterpretation, but the precision with which the Sumerians tracked celestial bodies suggests that these images were not arbitrary. They were maps of divine order, expressions of astronomy translated into myth. In Sumerian belief, the universe was a living hierarchy. The heavens of Anu, the earth of Enlil, and the waters of Enki formed a three-tiered cosmos. The seals mirror this structure. Often, a central figure, a god or priest, stands between two realms, one above, one below. The design flows horizontally but symbolizes vertical movement, ascent and descent, communication between divine and mortal. Rolling the seal across clay recreated this motion, as if the act of printing it made the invisible visible. Some scholars see these seals as early forms of writing, a visual shorthand that predated cuneiform. Repeated motifs, the tree, the sun disk, the winged creature, function like ideograms, condensing complex ideas into symbols. This theory finds support in their distribution. Seals appear in temples, palaces, and archives, often beside tablets. They were both art and text, meant to be read as much as admired. Archaeological context strengthens this interpretation. At the site of Uruk, excavators found thousands of seal impressions pressed onto storage jar lids, doors, and even temple offerings. Each seal belonged to an individual or institution: a priest, an official, a workshop. To break a seal was to break a covenant. The imprint was not just decoration, it was a legal and spiritual guarantee. This connection between sealing and sanctity endures even today in the way we still seal contracts or seal our promises. The word itself is Sumer's gift. Modern imaging has revealed layers unseen by early archaeologists. Under infrared light and 3D scanning, restorers detect pigment residues trapped in grooves, traces of paint or dye once rubbed into the carvings to make the impressions vivid. Under magnification, hidden microscripts appear, tiny cuneiform marks recording names or invocations. What once seemed purely decorative turns out to be both a text and talisman. The precision of these objects has even inspired speculation that the Sumerians possessed optical aids, polished crystal lenses, or concave mirrors used to enlarge detail. Archaeological finds such as the Nimrud lens, discovered in Assyria much later but within the same tradition, show that ancient craftsmen understood how to bend light. If similar tools existed in earlier Sumer, they could explain the near-microscopic craftsmanship of the seals. Number 2. The brew of immortality. In the temples of ancient Sumer, where the air shimmered with the scent of incense and grain, the people sang to a goddess who was neither a warrior nor a queen, but a brewer. Her name was Ninkasi, the lady who fills the mouth, and her art was considered sacred. To the Sumerians, beer was not a luxury or an indulgence. It was a bridge between the human and the divine. Every jar of frothing liquid, every sip drawn through a straw of reed, was part of a ritual as old as civilization itself. Archaeologists have found traces of this devotion in the ruins of Godin Tepe in Iran and Uruk in southern Iraq. Residues of barley, emmer wheat, and yeast embedded in pottery shards nearly 6,000 years old. Chemical analysis of these residues revealed the telltale signs of fermentation, making them the earliest physical evidence of beer on Earth. Yet the Sumerians did not see brewing as chemistry. They saw it as transformation, an act that mirrored creation itself, decay turning to life, chaos to order, grain to spirit. In the famous Hymn to Ninkasi, carved into clay around 1800 BCE, the process is described step by step, grinding the malt, mixing it with honey and water, fermenting it in great jars sealed with clay. You are the one who bakes the bapir in the great oven, the hymn sings. You are the one who waters the malt set on the ground. You pour out the filtered beer like the onrush of the Tigris and Euphrates. These lines are both prayer and recipe, the earliest brewing manual in history. Beer was woven into every part of Sumerian life. It was a staple of the diet, a daily wage for labourers, a ritual offering to the gods. In temple records from Lagash and Ur, scribes carefully listed the rations of beer distributed to workers, sometimes as much as 2 litres per person per day. It sustained them when the water was unsafe to drink and the sun burned the fields dry. It also played a role in medicine. Physicians prescribed beer mixed with herbs as remedies for ailments ranging from fever to childbirth pains. And in myth, beer became the agent of civilization itself. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the wild man Enkidu becomes human only after tasting beer. He drank the beer, 7 jugs, and his heart grew light. His face shone and he sang with joy. He became wise and expansive. It is a transformation more profound than any weapon or crown, from animal to man through the alchemy of fermentation. Beer, not bronze, marked the true beginning of civilization. Scientists today understand what the Sumerians intuited. Fermentation is one of nature's oldest chemical miracles. Yeast consumes sugar and produces alcohol, transforming the raw into the refined. It is the same process that makes bread rise and wine sparkle. In Sumer, this process symbolized rebirth, a divine rhythm that echoed the cycle of the seasons. The frothing of a vat was like the flooding of the rivers, the renewal of life from decay. Recent experiments by archaeologists at the University of Chicago and Brewing Science Institute have recreated Sumerian beer using Ninkasi's hymn as a guide. The result is a cloudy, mildly sour beverage, thick with grain, tasting somewhere between ale and bread soup. What surprised researchers was its nutritional value. rich in proteins, minerals, and B vitamins. Beer in ancient Sumer wasn't merely intoxicating, it was nourishing, almost sacred sustenance. The connection between beer and divinity was more than symbolic. In temple reliefs, priests are shown offering cups of beer to the gods, and in royal tombs, such as those excavated in by Sir Leonard Woolley, silver cups and long golden straws were found placed beside the dead. Even in the afterlife, the Sumerians believed the gods would expect offerings of beer. It was the drink that bound both worlds. Number 1. The day Sumer disappeared. The final days of Sumer did not arrive with an explosion. They came quietly, like the fading of light after sunset. The rivers still flowed. The ziggurat of still cast its long shadow across the plain. The scribes still pressed their reeds into wet clay, their tablets drying under the same relentless sun. But something invisible had begun to unravel. The first civilization on Earth, the people who invented writing, kingship, and the calendar, was slowly dying. Around 2100 BCE, Sumer was the jewel of Mesopotamia. Its cities, Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, Eridu, thrived under kings who called themselves shepherds of the people. They built temples that touched the sky and canals that stitched the desert into gardens. They measured the heavens and inscribed their laws in clay. And then, within a few centuries, it was gone. The language of Sumer fell silent, its people scattered, and its achievements absorbed by other empires. How could something so vast and advanced simply vanish? Archaeology provides the first clues. Beneath the ruins of cities like and Lagash, scientists have found thick salt layers in the soil, evidence of irrigation gone wrong. For centuries, the Sumerians had harnessed the Tigris and Euphrates to flood their fields. But the water carried salt from the desert. As generations passed, the soil grew poisoned, crops withered, grain yields collapsed. Tablets from the late 3rd millennium record a desperate shift. Wheat fields replaced by barley, a plant more resistant to salt. But even barley began to fail. By 2100 BCE, harvests had fallen by half. Civilization was starving. Climate data from ice cores and sediment samples tells a darker story. Around 2200 BCE, a massive drought struck the Near East, an event scientists call the 2-kilo-year aridification event. The monsoon weakened, rainfall ceased, and dust storms swept across Mesopotamia. Lakes dried, rivers shrank, and entire regions turned to dust. This wasn't a local misfortune, it was global. Across Egypt, China, and the Indus Valley, civilizations faltered in the same centuries. For Sumer, already weakened by ecological mismanagement, the drought was a death sentence. But nature was not the only enemy. As the south suffered, the north rose. New powers emerged in Akkad and later in Babylon. Nomadic groups from the mountains, the Gutians, raided the weakened cities, sacking Uruk and Kish. Tablets from that era read like laments. The storm that annihilates cities roared against the land. The gods have abandoned us. One of the most haunting of these, known as the Lament for describes priests wandering the ruins, crying that even the gods' temples have fallen. It's the first recorded elegy for a civilization, a people aware of their own extinction. When archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the royal tombs of in the 1920s, he found gold lyres, jewelled headdresses, and banquet scenes frozen in death. He also found signs of collapse, evidence of mass burials and flood layers between cultural strata. Beneath final glory lay mud and ash, silent witnesses to a catastrophe that no army could reverse. The flood remembered in Sumerian myth may have been not a single deluge, but a metaphor for time itself washing civilization away. Yet the end of Sumer is not a story of destruction, but of transformation. Their language, though no longer spoken, became the sacred tongue of priests and scholars for nearly 2,000 years. The Akkadians adopted it, Babylon preserved it, and even in Assyrian times, students still learned Sumerian hymns as we now study Latin. In that sense, Sumer never truly vanished. It simply changed form, dissolving into the cultures it had inspired. The material evidence of that continuity is everywhere. The cuneiform script, born in Sumer, evolved into Akkadian, Elamite, and Hittite writing systems. Their numerical base 60 mathematics still measures our time and angles. Their myths of a great flood, of gods descending from the heavens, of a hero seeking immortality, became the backbone of later religions. The Epic of Gilgamesh, copied and translated across empires, preserved Sumer's voice long after its people were gone. Modern excavations reveal how this cycle unfolded. As southern Mesopotamia dried, populations migrated northward to more fertile lands. The power center shifted from Ur and Eridu to Babylon and Assur. The Sumerian identity faded, but their innovations endured. Architecture, law, and myth passing through generations like DNA of culture. What vanished was not knowledge, but name. Still, some mysteries remain. In recent years, satellite imaging has uncovered traces of vast canal systems stretching far beyond the known city boundaries. Some canals lead into what are now barren deserts, suggesting that Sumer once managed landscapes far larger than historians imagined. Others end in dry basins that may have been ancient lakes, long evaporated. If these systems were abandoned suddenly, as the droughts worsened, the collapse may have been faster and more dramatic than we thought. A warning written in earth. Archaeobotanists analysing ancient pollen grains in sediment cores from the Persian Gulf have found a sharp decline in wetland species around 2000 BCE, replaced by salt-tolerant plants. It's the biological signature of desolation, nature recording what tablets describe in poetry. The gods didn't abandon Sumer, the environment did. And in that story lies a timeless lesson, that even the greatest civilizations depend on balance between human ambition and the planet that sustains it. Yet many mysteries remain surrounding the fall of the Sumerian civilization. Historians and archaeologists are still digging deeper, searching for what truly happened, whether it was climate, conquest, or something far more complex that erased the first great culture of humankind. What do you think caused the fall of Sumer? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the world's first civilization, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of forgotten worlds.